All right. This is our first ever review here on the channel, and we're taking a look at Weezer's 30th anniversary of their debut album, the Blue Album. That's right, the Blue Album recently turned 30, and to celebrate, we got a whole bunch of different versions of it. This here is the deluxe version on vinyl, one of the higher end of the versions they had. One's on blue, obviously. They had a zoetropic version where plays images if you're playing the right number of frames it spins. They had some CD ones. They had this one, and then they also had a version of this where it's an actual sweater. As you see it here, it looks just like a sweater, but it's actually just cardboard. Still pretty cool though. It's got like a thread coming out of it, like if it was a sweater, like the sweater song "Pull This Thread As I Walk Away." Pretty fun because it does come out. I haven't seen that before on a packaging. So before we get into so what is this? This is Weezer's debut album, as I mentioned. Absolute classic. Came out May 10th, 1994 on DGC Records. That's David Geffen. At a time when music was about to drastically shift in the 90s. Kurt Cobain had died only a month before, after grunge had really been the thing. And then this is really kind of the first, I'd say, post-grunge 90s kind of pop shift. Your Weezers and your Green Days and things like that. And, right time, right place, right? And this box set kind of shows that shift in musical attitude as well. But we'll get into that as we go through everything that's in here. So there's a quick overview of what all is in here. It's a 4 LP set. It also has a 10-inch and a 7-inch in addition to a bunch of, just special knickknacks and stuff. So as we look at the packaging, I said it looks like a fake sweater, right? It's kind of fun with the string that goes through from the front end. On the inside, as you open it up, you're greeted to the garage, like in the garage off the album. That's pretty fun. Inside of the garage, which will open up later, some special little, extras thrown in. So it's kind of fun on the box, especially one this big. But let's go take a look at everything that's inside of here. First and foremost, the most important part of a box set like this, the actual album. I have seen some that don't come with them, which, I mean, in some cases can be kind of okay, right? Like, if you're buying the 30th anniversary deluxe edition of Weezer's Blue Album, chances are you already have a copy of the Blue Album, which I did when I got this. But I was spurred on to buy this because the copy I had was like a blue version from Target a few years ago. And honestly, I don't really ever get albums that seem to skip that often. But that skipped in 3 or 4 different songs, like first play. It was kind of a terrible, terrible pressing. Even when it wasn't skipping, it didn't sound all that good anyway. But luckily here, the actual Blue Album, regular version here is pressed fantastically flat, sounds fantastic, and no skipping. If you're not super, familiar with the Blue Album, as mentioned, it's Weezer's debut. It's Weezer. What else really describe it as? It's distorted pop, very fun, rather nerdy material at times. A lot of kind of unrequited love and jealousy mixed in there as well. Very kind of, it sounds like nerds. They kind of look like nerds. Definitely different, not like cool. That said, it definitely was intended to be a pop album. It was produced by Rick Ocasek of the Cars. We will see, that a little more here, kind of wink wink about Weezer and the Cars as we go through some of the bonus material. That's something to keep in mind. Like when you listen to this, just remember this was intended to be a pop album. And you'll see how it kind of shifted into that as it went on. This box set does a great job of showing it. But anyway, so the actual album itself, fantastic. Like front to back, not really a single song worth skipping. From the moment it kicks off with My Name is Jonas all the way to the long Only in Dreams at the end. Fantastic, fantastic album. And the box set really delivers on, a true great anniversary edition that highlights what's great about it. So do yourself a favor. I mean, if you're clicking on this and you haven't heard this album, I don't really know what you're doing here. Go listen to it would be my advice. And if you like it, I guarantee you this will be on sale and you can go pick it up for less than it originally cost. So next thing here, interestingly, the sorting here is kind of, felt kind of random to me. Next thing was a poster. To quote them, my favorite rock group, Kiss. Isn't that funny? It's Weezer done as Kiss from In the Garage. Honestly, a lot of the stuff in here seems to reference just that song. Obviously, the cover's the Sweater song, but there's tons of references to In the Garage, which is by far one of the actual like nerdiest songs I've ever heard by a massive, successful band. Next up is what appears to be a record, but is actually just a jacket being used to contain a bunch of stuff and some other smaller records. We'll get into kind of what's in that later on, as it's very interesting, but I do feel kind of throws the flow of the packaging off. We're just to dive into all of that here in the beginning. So the first like actual disc of bonus material, which if you're buying a box of this big, it better have some pretty cool bonus material in it, and this one definitely delivers. Is this first one of the kitchen tape demos? These are recorded in their house. Apparently, it was when they're renting, and their goal when they were recording this was just going to be the album. This came with a nice zine, hinted something we'll see in that jacket I mentioned earlier. That kind of breaks down what everything is, as well as has some good accounts from the time of how they came to be, where they recorded at, all the time periods and whatnot. And so the kitchen tape demos here were recorded in their kitchen, as the name would suggest, and was an attempt at making an actual album. So the production's kind of good on these, but not as good as the actual album. But it definitely highlights kind of how it changed from their first stab at it to what we eventually got. I would say it's slightly more acoustic, but also at times kind of more maybe aggressive. Rivers has a bit more like of a raspy, almost a growl thing kind of going on some of these tracks, which is really interesting and is completely gone by the time of the actual album. Especially like on like track 2, The World Has Turned, you can like really hear that in his vocals, the way he was singing back then compared to how he'd actually do, and that's really neat to hear. Because again, not only are these like very listenable, but it's just interesting like the transitions. On an album like the Blue album that I've heard so many times, to then hear songs in a completely new light is always great. I know a lot of people like mention they don't like demos and things like that. Like, oh, why would I buy the Deluxe when I got much stuff I never to listen to? But I find oftentimes, if I've heard it a bunch, those demos and stuff are like new lifeblood into the music that I love. And so hearing how they were like formulated and a new version, oftentimes like I end up listening to those a lot more if they're really good, especially after like it comes out. Right, I'll spin this, I'll reach for this guy instead of the Blue album. And plus, with that being not the actual album and these being demos, there are tracks on here that just didn't make the album. There's a track called Paper Face. It's like really aggressive, almost like a Foo Fighters song that you didn't get on the Blue album. It also features kind of a weird dip, the song structure is strange. Like it has like the aggressive part, goes completely quiet, comes back to a like kind of softer side before going back into the aggressive. It almost sounds like two totally different songs. So again, recommend checking this one out if you're into the Blue album and want to hear a little bit more, because as I said, they're kind of good reimaginings or at least different versions of the songs you have, plus some of the stuff that just as it didn't make the album. Next one here is the early demos. And if you thought like the kitchen tape demos are more acoustic, these are like way heavier. Some of these date back to 1992, 2 full years before the album would actually come out. Peak of grunge, and I think that kind of actually like really shows through in some of these. They're from different time periods, like they're early demos because they're from different time periods, and calling them a demo may even be a bit much. I think some of these are just straight up tape recorded practice sessions. Like the first few tracks are labeled as from their third ever practice. It's pretty crazy that they brought in to record on that. There's a track on there, I Can't Forget the Way, that honestly sounds like them trying to be like Alice in Chains or something. It's totally different than the Weezer we'd come to know, but also not at the same time. It's just kind of weird. But you can definitely feel that like 92 grunge influence, and you can see it on them. I mean, just looking at like the pictures of them at the time period here, like Rivers has like really long hair, which seems extremely foreign and kind of off-putting. It's almost hard to pick them out in pictures. As I said, I'm not complaining about the different sound though. I think this is great. I think the rawness, I mean, it's still pretty clear. It's not like it was like recorded in another room, like sometimes you get like demos or old live material that just sounds terrible. But they definitely picked stuff that it's all very well recorded. Oh, I mean, at least clear. It's still very raw. There's not a lot of mixing going on here. But this thing, love this. The demos are great. This is another set where the other one was more of a polish. I said their like attempt almost at an indie version of their own album. These are clearly like demos. Pretty crazy. Great to hear. Loved that. Next is a live album, culling together 3 or so different shows. And I kind of knew this coming in, but then I confirmed looking it up. Weezer's never had a live album, at least not like a full-fledged concert recording or anything. They have like an EP of live material or two, and then like around like 2009 for a couple years they did like live bootlegs you could buy as like MP3s. But that's it. For a band this big with this many albums and tours a lot, it's honestly pretty surprising, especially when you have something like this. I mean, first off, let's get out of the way. This is pre-Blue Album live recording, so it's also very different, slightly more aggressive. Though the first one is a little on the acoustic end, but even then, still kind of chaotic. They're great, and I think it highlights just how much we need like an actual like live Weezer album, especially if they have anything. I mean, they have these that they'd culled together. I can only imagine from the actual tour for this album, they must have something in the vault. It's honestly surprising that it wasn't included this, if they have something, which again, they must if they have like this far pre-Blue Album Weezer material live. But, one can only hope that we get a real one, considering just like how good this is. And it only gets crazier as like this live disc goes on. There's a cover of China Grove, which seems very strange choice for Weezer, but maybe not. I mean, if you look at the Teal album, tons of yacht rock and stuff, but definitely of like the time Weezer, it's funny, kind of almost ironic track to play. But they do a great cover of it here. So jumping from there, we're going to jump back to the garage over here on the left side of the record. Inside of that, we have a little spool, for the string for the front end. We have a D12, as mentioned, 12-sided dice in the garage itself, and a button that appears to have the kick drum head from the time period, which is pretty cool, though I would be amazed how many people are going to notice that's what it is. That said, maybe you can use it to find other deep Weezer heads around. Then to the real bonus material kind of folder. So as I mentioned, this jacket doesn't really have a 12-inch inside of it. Instead, what it has is a 10-inch, a 7-inch, and kind of all of the other miscellaneous stuff that came with this. It's sometimes in these box sets, you get the kind of like some thrown in the postcards or like a sticker, a laminate. Here we got a zine. Now the zine itself's pretty cool. I think it does a great job of breaking everything down, and it's kind of fun to see them, kind of homaging back to the early days of, fandom and stuff like that. Though I do wish it came with an actual book. Like typically in a box set like this, you do get some sort of big book with like glossy pictures and things like that, taking advantage of that. At least 12-inch size that the record has to be to make a book that big. So it's kind of a bummer we didn't get anything like that inside of here. But again, the zine at least does a great job covering all the material and everything that's in here, explaining like what it is, what's the significance of it, and how it became Weezer as we know it. In addition to that, there is a 10-inch single of BBC material. So this is like the only thing in here I think that's actually like post-Blue Album's release, and it features them live at the BBC, which if you haven't really ever like looked into that, that's a thing that like every artist does. It seems like they go over to the BBC, they play there. Though a lot of times what ends up happening is they end up like live in studio, and here is not really a different from that. Like there's no like audience really. It's them doing their songs in studio, and it's interesting to read in the book where they talk about that. Like Weezer kind of had a move on and forget attitude at the time. So to them then go over to the UK and be asked to play stuff, they're like, oh, well, we got some new things we want to try. And they're like, no, nobody knows what that is. Do your Blue material. And so then here's them, performing quite well. It's good. The Blue material, though I am interested to hear what it would have been like if they would have actually been allowed to just bust out some Pinkerton stuff instead. Though if that was the case, it probably wouldn't have been in this box set. We also have a 7-inch of just called Jamie, and that's probably because it features 2 different takes at that track. This seems to be from like a single recording session where they had tried to make sort of another attempt at like a studio level single or something. It's great. This song is pretty good. It's a Weezer track through and through. Rivers Cuomo pining after a woman who may or may not be his, saying he feels very lost without them. Beyond that, inside of here, we have a set of photos that look to be outtakes, probably for the album cover, which is pretty cool. Though, again, it's like 3 glossy photos. I would have preferred like one big book with like a bunch of like photos of like the band performing and recording like you normally get with something like this. Then we also have a sticker sheet, which is pretty fun, but I doubt I'll ever use it for anything. And so that's really everything that's inside of, as I said, the Weezer 30th Anniversary Super Deluxe Vinyl Edition of the Blue Album. And honestly, I was quite pleased. I've definitely seen some deluxe editions lately that the material just doesn't deliver. Because at the end of the day, it's all about the music, I would say. And I thoroughly enjoyed everything in this box set. The album, again, great. This sounds fantastic, so it's going to definitely replace that terrible version I had from Target or Walmart. I don't know where I'd gotten it at. The bonus material will be something I will definitely be throwing on. As I said, like, the non-album tracks are great. The album tracks that are on here are great to hear again. Specifically, like early demos one when they're like in the garage on their 3rd session or something like that. The My Name Is Jonas version is truly a treasure to behold. I mean, a track that's already, always been probably maybe secretly my favorite on the album. In that kind of just raw primordial state, and it's chaos. I mean, if you listen to the song, it's got a lot of like quick arpeggio in the beginning. There's a lot happening, and this is really their 3rd practice. I mean, they're nailing it, but it sounds like a train getting ready to fly right off the rails, but they managed to hold it together throughout the chaos, and it's fantastic. And that's just like one highlight out of a ton of things on this where I was listening to it, and I was like, man, this is, as I said, like, I'm going to probably be playing the bonus material more than I will be the actual album going forward when I'm just listening to music, which is probably the highest compliment I can really give this thing, is that I feel like it added to the Blue Album. I didn't feel like any of this is a waste. The bonuses were fun. The packaging was great, having the string. They didn't have to do that, but they still did. I think that's fun. Final thing to look at, this thing retailed for $250. I did not get it for that. I got it for less than that. Good rule of thumb, if there's a band putting out a deluxe version of their album, it will be pressed to death, and you can almost always get it cheaper. The only weird real caveats to that typically are if it's like, older Led Zeppelin box sets or something, like they've done like their super deluxes of theirs. Those tended to sell out over time. You do still occasionally see them pop up, but honestly, a band like Weezer, Blue Album, any like Green Day stuff, 90s bands in these deluxe editions, unless it's like the sweater version of the Blue Album, if it's just like the regular super deluxe like this one is, it will go down in price, so don't buy it for that $250. That said, I do think it's worth probably close to that. I do think this would have been better at $200, just considering like the lack of discs. The main album's 1 disc. Each of the demo ones is 1 disc. The live album is 1 disc. So you're only getting like 4 LPs at over 15 LP. I mean, that's pretty steep. That said, you are getting, it's stupid, but like the nice box, the zine, again, great read, though it's not that much. I mean, it's small. Again, it shouldn't really add that much to the price. Some little other doodads. So yeah, if you can get it on sale, do it. I would highly recommend this for any Weezer fan. So do yourself a favor, and if not, guess what? It's almost certainly on streaming, so get it on your Spotify, YouTube Music. Just go listen to it. Listen to those demos, listen to those live material, and just get a glimpse again into an album that maybe you loved, maybe you just knew of, maybe even heard before, in which case, again, go listen to the Blue Album. But I'd highly recommend it. There's a reason it has so many pressings for its 30th anniversary, because it's a great album, and I think that this does a great service to it.